everyone! Welcome to Dangan Dive, a Fans for Fans podcast where we talk about all things Danganronpa and go as detailed as possible into its lore, storylines, characters, etc. I'm your host, Melody Snowflake, and it's really great to have you for this episode. For this first episode, we're going to be doing a quick overview of the Danganronpa timeline. And I know there is a super long video here on YouTube of it already, where it covers the full Dangan timeline in excruciating detail, and it's amazing, so I highly recommend you check it out if you haven't seen it yet. But it's over 3 hours long, so be forewarned if you don't have the time to sit down for that. Anyway, before we begin, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be doing in this podcast in general, since it's the first episode. So, I've been a huge Danganronpa fan for basically ever since I got into the series in late 2020. I started playing the first game just a few days after the 10th anniversary of the game, and it was pretty much an amazing experience. At first, it was just, a regular visual novel for me, but as the chapters went on, it became clear to me that this was turning quickly into something really special. I got really attached to the characters in general, and really attached to the storyline, because it had a really interesting vibe that no other story had been able to give me thus far. And so, I ended up becoming really passionate about the series, and I love talking about it any opportunity I get. The Danganronpa Universe is very interesting because even though it doesn't have all the crazy magic lore and stuff that some other fantasy worlds tend to have, the Danganronpa Universe isn't what you'd call a regular world either. There are some things that can be achieved in that universe that seem almost impossible in today's world, at least with our current technology. For example, the New World program seems extremely advanced. Of course, virtual reality simulators are a thing in the real world, but the New World program takes it to a whole new level. But we're not here to discuss technology or how things are in the modern world in real life. Oh no, we're here to discuss the world in the Danganronpa universe. And there is a lot to cover, so let's start from the very beginning. The story starts some several hundred years ago by this guy named Izuru Kamakura, who you might recognize the name of by, some other character in the series who also goes by that name. But Izuru Kamakura was the original founder of Hope's Peak Academy. It was a school that was designed to train young talents from Japan and to help them achieve success in life. The school was really successful, and over hundreds of years and generations, they would always handpick their students to attend the school every year. Of course, they also had a very special tradition, apart from just picking talented students. They also had a yearly lucky draw thing, where it's like basically a lottery, and the lucky winner will get to attend Hope's Peak Academy with all the other ultimates, and, everyone else just unfortunately can't. At least, that was until the reserve program became a thing in Hope's Peak Academy. You see, Hope's Peak Academy was more than just a school. Its staff also wanted to do research, and the kind of research they wanted to do was talent research. And they needed money for that, but they didn't exactly have all the funding they needed, especially since a lot of the projects they were working on were super risky and, kind of secret. So they opened up a section of the school called the Reserve Course, where other people, anyone really, can just pay to study in Hope's Peak, except that they won't be an ultimate or studying with the ultimates. It'll just kind of be like a brand thing where they can say they go to Hope's Peak, but they're just having regular education. Over time, Hope's Peak started recruiting more and more people to the project, and they finally reached one of their ultimate goals, to try and create a person with every talent imaginable. This person they would name Izuru Kamakura after Hope's Peak's original founder. But they can't just create a person. They have to modify an already existing person. And that's where Hajime comes in. Hajime was a reserve corps student, but he felt really insecure about that and really wanted to have a talent. Prior to his transformation to Izuru Kamakura, he made friends with some of the ultimate talents, such as Chiaki and a few of her other classmates, but mostly Chiaki. Has he even met with the other classmates? I'll have to go rewatch that part of the series to make sure if, the time ever comes to talk about Hajime, which it will at some point. But for now, he was friends with at least one ultimate, but he was still really insecure, and despite Chiaki managing to encourage him for a while, he eventually gave in and said, you know what, I'll participate in the Izuru Kamakura project, which he did, and he became a completely different person. Hajime and Izuru are not the same people at all. Even though the physical body is technically shared, even the physical body can be seen to have had physical changes. This could just be a visual representation, of course, but in this universe, it seems that when the mind is altered, the physical body seems to be altered as well. For some reason, it's probably a visual representation thing, but it's still pretty interesting that this is how it works in the Dangan universe. The same thing happens with Toko and Genocide Jack whenever they switch between each other. There is a slight modification in their appearance. And also, when Taka became, that combination between himself and Mondo, something changed there in his physical appearance as well. It seems to be a thing in this Danganronpa universe, which is obviously not something that happens in our world. Anyway, shortly after Izuru Kamakura became a thing, Class 78 came to Hope's Peak Academy, the 78th class of Ultimates, and with it came a girl, a high school girl, named Junko Enoshima. Now, Junko was someone who had been bored for most of her life, and we'll go into more detail as to why and everything later, but for now, let's just say she was so bored that nothing could interest her anymore because everything was just so predictable. When she came to Hope's Peak, she just found everything so boring, but she had a plan. Hope's Peak was a school brimming with hope, and peace and all that. That's so predictable. But Junko was all like, nah, why don't we do something different? And she decided she was going to spread despair. Junko did a multitude of things, including brainwashing, manipulation, and doing a bunch of definitely illegal projects. Oh yeah, and she also convinced a bunch of children to come on her side, and they were already mentally unstable from childhood traumas that we will also get into at some point. But eventually, she was able to cause the end of the world, called the tragedy. Of course, she had her twin sister Mukuro's help, but Mukuro, though willingly helping her sister, didn't have the same evil intentions as Junko. She just wanted to please her. She just wanted to do things that would make Junko happy with her because she wanted her love and approval. I mean, they are sisters after all. And Junko kind of had the habit of bullying Mukuro, but we'll get into that later as well. Man, you see why we have to make a whole podcast about this? There's a lot to talk about with the Dangan universe, and we haven't even got to the main part of the tragedy yet. So, the tragedy happened. Let's just say Chiaki died, and the rest of her classmates became ultimate despairs. And Junko was locked up in one part of the school with her other Class 78 classmates because no one knew that she was actually the cause of everything bad that was happening. And from within, the idea of locking all the students up was not to keep them prisoner or anything. It was to protect the last surviving class of hope from the despair outside. Unfortunately, since Junko was among them, that was not going to last. The headmaster was killed, and all the other teachers were nowhere to be found. Junko erased all of their memories and started a killing game where only 6 students came out alive. Makoto Naegi, Toko Fukawa, Yasuhiro Hagakure, Byakuya Togami, Kyoko Kirigiri, and Aoi Asahina. Only 6 of them survived. Everyone else died. Including Junko, actually. She met her demise at the hands of her own killing game rules. And because Makoto was able to convince everyone to have hope against Junko's despair. So these 6 escape, join the Future Foundation, which is kind of like a rebellion thing against the ultimate despair. And it's like trying to make the world back to normal. And these 6 are trying to now locate the ultimate despairs and all the other people who got kidnapped. Because, see, their family members got kidnapped as a result of the whole killing game thing that Junko did. So that she could blackmail them into killing each other by using the threats of, injured loved ones as a, motive. So they kind of went to search for the ultimate despairs and all the missing captors, which led to Toko, Byakuya, Yasuhiro, these 3, ending up in Toa City, where they ran into these children who called themselves the Warriors of Hope. Oh, and Toko met Komaru, who is Makoto's younger sister. And they had some adventures together, which totally didn't result in them fighting children or anything, which is really sad, to be honest. Oh, and did I mention most of the kids were actually brainwashed? Well, by the end of it, Toko and Komaru became good friends, and they decided to stay in Toa City to help fight the despair there. Meanwhile, everyone else went back and continued their mission to find the ultimate despairs. They eventually located them, but, they were all kind of evil and stuff at the time, for lack of a better word. Izuru Kamakura was among them. And so, against the Future Foundation's ideals and intentions, the remaining students of Hope's Peak Academy decided that they were going to try and rehabilitate them. So there was an unfinished virtual reality program called the New World program, and they decided to incorporate all the Ultimate Despairs, 16 of them, into that program. This program would erase all their memories of being ultimate despairs, basically reverting them to how they were like at the beginning of their very first school year at Hope's Peak, way before the tragedy happened, way before Hajime became Izuru Kamakura. Of course, there was still someone missing. Oh, did I say that there were 16 of them? There was only 15. The only reason you see 16 in the New World program is because they kind of created an AI version of Chiaki, because that's how the program worked. It was supposed to recreate someone who is close to the participants of the program. Oh, and a dancing rabbit mascot named Usami. But Izuru Kamakura snuck in a little AI chip of his own. And that AI chip turned out to be Junko! Like an AI representation of her, who's very, who basically has all of Junko's, crazy traits. So she infiltrated the New World program, turned it into a second killing game, and the students had to be rescued. Luckily, none of them actually ended up dying in the process, but they did get hurt mentally during the time. But the rehabilitation worked, and the students eventually woke up from their comatose states after what the New World program mishap put them through. And Hajime is kind of Hajime again, but not really. He kind of has the personality of Hajime, but the abilities of Izuru. It's pretty cool, honestly. Meanwhile, the remaining students who did this whole thing in the first place were getting punished by the Future Foundation. And, well, let's just say one of them wanted to use the situation to his advantage. Because, you see, one of the people Junko manipulated was this guy named Ryota Meteorite. He was the only one of Chiaki's classmates that was able to, not become an ultimate despair. So he was still kind of sound of mind, but very, very distressed because Junko had actually manipulated him into making some videos that ended up causing the destruction of the world. So he's weighed down by all that. So this one guy, the leader of the Future Foundation, in fact, was all like, what if we get this guy to make a hope video instead to reverse the effects of what his despair video that Junko made him do, did to the world. And he decided the best way to do that was to create yet another killing game. But the rules of this one are slightly different than the previous two. They're not like the ones Junko orchestrated. We won't go into detail about that now, but let's just say not many people got out alive. A lot of them ended up committing suicide or killing someone, or at least they thought they killed someone, but they just killed themselves. Everything was basically going crazy. But then, they were the few of them who managed to survive were able to get out. And at the same time, the rehabilitated Ultimate Despairs, or should I say Chiaki's classmates, came around, took the blame for what happened, which wasn't even their fault because they were kind of out cold when that happened. But they took the blame so that the world wouldn't see the Future Foundation in a bad light. And the world eventually returned to some semblance of peace. Hope's Peak Academy reopened. Makoto and Kyoko became the headmaster and headmistress of the school, and they all lived happily ever after, except that's not exactly the end yet, because you see, there's more to this story. There is an alternate universe where everything we just said is just one out of many tragic killing game stories. These killing game stories were so popular, in fact, that the whole world wanted to watch show after show, season after season of such killing game stories. At first, they were just played by actors. But as time went on, people wanted it for real. People started volunteering to be part of killing game stories. They started volunteering to participate in a killing game. Memories of theirs would get erased. They would end up killing each other until only a few of them are left. And the audience would get to watch in awe every time as hope overcomes despair. It became so popular that there were 53 total seasons of this game. But why only 53? That's kind of an awkward number to end at, don't you think? Well, here's the thing. On the 53rd killing game, one of the last surviving members, named Shuichi Saihara, decided that he had had enough. When his killing game started, he had started bonding with the rest of his classmates, just like all the other students in previous killing games did. But then, one by one, they all fell. They all got killed, and they all had to participate in horrible class trials that ended in the Blackened getting executed. He had had enough, and when he found out the truth, he ratted out the mastermind to everyone else. Well, he didn't rat out, he kind of exposed her, and he told everyone that that's enough. Hope can no longer defeat despair. They're just not going to play this killing game anymore, because even if memories had been taken from all of them, even if they aren't the same people who volunteered for the killing games in the first place anymore, it still wasn't right for this to occur, because even though they were completely new people, and even though their personalities and backstories were all fabricated for the purposes of the killing game, they were still people, regardless of whether or not they were fabricated people. So, due to his perseverance, he was able to end the killing game shows for good, and he and 2 other survivors, yes, just 3 of them survived out of 16, got out alive and walked out into the world to see what the future had for them. That's the basics of the Danganronpa story, and I skipped a lot, and I mean a lot of details. I haven't even mentioned all the characters yet, and there are a lot of characters to go through. There are 16 students for each of the main 3 games, and there are 5 Warriors of Hope, not counting the other main characters from Despair Girls. And, of course, there are the characters from the Danganronpa 3 anime. And there are even side stories like Danganronpa Zero and Danganronpa Kirigiri. Oh, and bonus stories like Danganronpa If. Oh, and another side story called Danganronpa Ultra Despair Hagakure. There is so much to go through, and I'm pretty sure I haven't mentioned all of them yet either. So, we're going to be going through them all in future episodes. For now, though, I'm glad that you guys came to the first episode of this podcast. I've never actually done a podcast before. So I'm really glad that you're here. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope this has been fun for you guys as it has been for me. I love discussing the Danganronpa series and universe, and we'll definitely be doing a lot more of that in future episodes. Thank you again, and I'll see you in the next podcast. Goodbye!